Hey guys, Sam from West Meadow Rabbits here, and today I'm going to teach you how to plant a tree the right way. We're taking a quick break from rabbit-related content because it is the height of tree planting season, depending on where you are in the Northern Hemisphere, and the rabbits are pretty much doing their thing, and I've covered most of that in other videos. But since we are setting up the new farm, a huge part of that is our tree plantings. I think we've got a total of 120 trees to plant. So far we've planted a little more than half of those, and that's a mix between fruit, nut trees, and bushes, flowering trees, wildlife trees, and trees for building materials and firewood. So today we're planting 25 black locust trees, and if you've watched this channel for any amount of time, you know this is absolutely one of my favorite trees out there. Big in most permaculture and homesteading circles for a very good reason. It's basically the jack of all trades tree. It's native to southeastern US, but it is used all over the place for its many benefits. I have a whole video covering it, but the reason we're planting it here today is for rot-resistant building material, fast-growing firewood that's the quality of oak but grows at the speed of pine, and most importantly, this overgrown pasture right now is in the process of being converted back to pasture by our goats, and once it's mature, we want it to be in a silvopasture setup so we can transition to sheep. So as part of that silvopasture, we have lanes of fruit trees going up and down here that are going to be flanked by berry bushes, and interspersed between those fruit trees, we're going to plant black locust. And that's because these trees will fix nitrogen and their roots will go out into the pasture and fertilize the pasture. And by the time they start to shade the fruit trees, they'll be ready to be harvested for firewood. So planting trees is usually pretty straightforward. Sometimes people oversimplify it though. If you want to maximize your investment in trees, it's not as simple as just digging a hole and throwing the tree in. There's some steps you want to take. Obviously, the most important steps are choosing the appropriate trees for your site, figuring out the spacing, maturity, purposes, all that stuff should be available with any tree you're purchasing, and we're not going to cover that here. Once you have that information, you can fit it in strategically how you want to use it, which is what we're doing, and then you can get to actually planting it. So somewhat obviously, the most important part of planting your tree is the hole that you dig. So before we start, just keep in mind that this method works for any type of tree. Fruit tree, flowering tree, perennial bush or shrub, even trees that you're using for more general purposes like firewood or building materials, this is going to give it the best start possible. Because of the benefits you'll see from this, the tree's growth will be vastly accelerated in those first few years, and you may even be able to get it to start producing flowers, fruits, and nuts a year or two earlier than it otherwise would. This is probably overkill, this method, for black locust, which is a very weedy, strong tree that can handle itself in field-like environments like this. But I'm going to demonstrate with that just to show you. The rest of the black locust, the holes will probably be a little bit less elaborate, but this is how I plant all my fruit and nut trees. So when we start digging this hole, the key thing to keep in mind is what is the purpose of the hole. And it's not just a place to shove the roots. You got to think how a tree's root system works. Trees have basically two types of roots. There's a tap root, which goes down deep to try to suck up water and minerals from the subsoil that aren't accessible to most other plants that are in the shallower layers of the soil. And then there are feeder roots, which are a much shallower set of roots that creep along in the topsoil, and their main purpose is to grab up nitrogen and other nutrients generated from more biological processes that happen in the topsoil. So when we're digging a hole, we want to make sure we're taking care of both root functions. So what you're seeing me do here is I'm digging first a much wider hole, which is going to be for the feeder roots. So let me speed this up here. Okay, so now we have our first hole dug, and in my case, it's about a shovel blade's deep. And you'll notice that this soil is still all nice, dark topsoil. And I'm starting to hit the subsoil, which in this case here is mostly clay, so I stopped. This is going to give a nice, uncompacted area for the roots to go out into and head out into the topsoil. And in the case of black locust, with this pasture, as those roots migrate further out into the pasture, they're going to fix nitrogen, which is exactly what we want. Now that we've got this hole dug, we can move on to phase two, which is digging the hole for the taproot. Excuse me, Winnie. That hole is going to be in the center of this hole, and it's going to go significantly deeper, but it's also going to be much less wide. And I don't know if you can see on the camera, but the color's starting to change here. as we hit the subsoil. Now this hole doesn't have to be too deep for me because we have a fairly high water table here, which is good in some ways, bad in others. The other thing to keep in mind here is this method is totally scalable to the size of the transplant you have and how ambitious you want to be. So if you have a huge tree that's like, I don't know, 8 feet tall from a garden center, you'll obviously want to make both of your holes significantly bigger. In our case, we're dealing with bare root seedlings, and the black locust seedlings are actually some of the larger ones I've gotten. A lot of the other seedlings I've had are barely 8 inches tall, so their holes might be half this size. And that is getting us pretty deep, starting to get a little wet, so I think we'll call it there. Okay, so you can see we have our 2 holes. Our first level hole for the feeder roots, mostly topsoil. Our deeper hole for the taproot, which is all subsoil. Now we can add the tree. Now as you can see, this is a bare root sapling, and the tree is much smaller than the hole. And there's a reason for that, if Winnie doesn't collapse the hole. Let's take a time out here while I deal with the dog. She loves holes. So the reason we do this is because we want the soil completely uncompacted, far out from where the tree roots actually are right now, because it's going to make it way easier for them to grow and establish themselves. And the more our tree roots grow, the more it grows up top. So this seedling has a very clear taproot, which is nice. They don't always have that. So we start by sticking the taproot in. And remember, the dirt should never go higher than the root crown, which is where the roots start to come out. We're going to want it to be right there when we start putting the dirt in. So I'm sizing that out accordingly. I'm going to try to make sure the roots are fairly spread out while I start filling this back in. And again, if you have a second person, this is always easier, but it's just me. And what I'm doing as a trick is I'm slightly burying the tip a little deeper than I want it to be, and then I'm lifting it up to help keep it straight, which is helpful, again, when you're only one person. And I'm just putting the subsoil back around this, because again, this is the taproot. It's fine being that deep. Right. So gently compact it, but not a ton, because we don't want to undo all that compaction we did. And now we have our feeder roots, and we're ready to get those in. So let's start with the easy layer here. And again, I'm spreading those roots out kind of in 2 different directions to make sure that they don't grow in a pattern we don't like. We want them to grow in a healthy pattern, which for feeder roots is spreading. A lot of times, depending on the quality of the seedling you get, they'll be root bound and you'll have to straighten them out more. They may not have a nice taproot like this one, but this one did, so no problems there. Again, we're spreading that root out a bit. This one's a little bigger. So there's my root. Just cover that up. Also, I'm doing this as a demonstration, but if you have heavy equipment or you've got hundreds of trees to do, there are more efficient ways to do this. But the main purpose here is to just give you guys an idea of how it's done. I gently lift just a hair. It's exactly where I want it. Now, I've got everything set up where I want it. I can use the shovel to finish this off. So, now that I've got it where I want it, I'm just gonna go around, lightly compact, not totally compact the soil, make sure the tree's straight. I'm gonna wanna grow in a way I want it to. And again, black locust is a tough tree, and I got a lot of these, so I'm not babying it. But we are gonna hop over to a flowering tree to show you the next steps. So as you can see, our next tree is much smaller. It's a flowering crabapple, but the same exact principles apply, especially when it comes to our next step, which is making this tree feel like it's in a forest. There's a really great saying that I love, which is that forests grow trees. It's deceptively simple, but the cool thing about trees is that their very presence builds a microclimate and environment that facilitates their growth. A large mature forest blocks wind and severe weather. It allows the trees to lean on each other. Its evaporation through the leaves actually seeds clouds and creates rain. the shady understory retains moisture. I could go on, but the point is trees do best when they're in a forest. At least most species of trees, with the big exception of pioneering species like black locust that we just planted, they can do quite fine in an open field. As a matter of fact, they'll take it over and convert it to forest. But the point still stands in that the primary way trees get nutrients and water is by partnering with fungi that are in the soil. The fungi partner with the tree roots, and in exchange for sugar from the tree, they will provide nutrients and water that the tree can't access. The tree roots, even the smallest tree roots, are very large. Whereas fungal mycelium, which is the part of the fungi that grows underground, if you think of a mushroom, the real body of the fungi is the mycelium. And this stuff is smaller than a human hair in many cases, and it can penetrate the tiniest areas and absorb nutrients and vitamins and water and carry that to the tree in a way the tree can't do by itself. The problem when you're planting a tree in a field or yard like this is that fields are primarily dominated by bacteria. The soil microenvironment is bacterial, whereas a forest's microenvironment is fungal. To build a fungal microenvironment, we need to suppress grass around the tree, and then we need to introduce organic matter for the fungi to feed off of. This organic matter, which is usually wood chips, has the added benefit of retaining water, protecting the tree's roots, acting like a sponge, on top of feeding fungi and beneficial insects, so it kickstarts that process. In an ideal world, you would want the mulched area of the tree to be as large as its crown, because tree roots are usually about the size of its crown. In many cases, that's not really practical, and even a small mulching, especially for seedlings, will make a huge difference. In theory, when you have established trees that are 50, 80 years old, you don't have to mulch anymore. But for those first 5 years of a seedling's life, that mulch really adds up. So after we've got our tree planted, a trick people do is apply cardboard, and this helps block out competition from grasses. It's not 100% necessary, and I only do it if I have cardboard on hand, but it will make a big difference in preventing grass coming up from your mulch. My preferred approach, especially when I don't have cardboard, is to just pile on so much mulch that nothing gets through, which is exactly what we're gonna do here. The easiest way to do this is just dump the mulch, being mindful you're not squishing your tree seedling, especially if it's small. And you wanna kind of shape it into a donut, with the tree being in the middle, sitting in that depression. You don't want to mulch right up to the base of the trunk. That's not usually good for trees, so I leave that area exposed. And there you go. It's probably too hard to see because of how tiny this little seedling is, but this mulch shape has a nice effect of also kind of allowing water to be funneled towards the middle, but also buffering it against too much surface water flow, and obviously protects the trunk from the mulch by leaving a little depression in the middle. And that's pretty much all there is to planting trees. So there you go, guys. That's how to plant a tree the right way. If you do this method, you're going to give your tree a huge jump start, and you'll dramatically decrease the amount of dead seedlings you may have after you plant them. Again, this is totally flexible. You can pick and choose where you want to skimp out on labor, especially if you have a ton of trees like I do. But if you're only planting a few trees in your yard, or fruit trees especially, which are very valuable, I highly recommend you do this. You'll be very happy with the results. I'm sure I don't need to sell you guys on the many, many benefits of trees. If you happen to raise meat rabbits or livestock, they can be a great source of fodder, in addition to all the other benefits that they provide that we kind of talked about earlier. If you like this video, please like and share with your friends. If you're not already subscribed, please do so. It helps the channel immensely. Be sure to leave me any comments, questions, or criticisms down below. And if you just want to chat, meet me on the Patreon. Otherwise, thank you so much, guys. I will see you in the next one.